We're only a couple of minutes late anyway. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. My guest today, Gregory L. Little, is the author of and co-authored of more than 70 books and workbooks, and has been featured in 14 documentaries on the History Channel, History 2, Discovery, National Geographic, Sci-Fi, MSNBC, and the Weather Channel, along with his wife, Laura. For over 10 years, he was involved in the search for Edgar Cayce's Atlantis in the Bahamas. He is the author of the Illustrated Encyclopedia of the Native American Indian Earthworks and several other books on the Mounds. Welcome, Gregory, to the show. Hello there.
Hi, Bob. Pleasure to be here. Hopefully, the sound and everything will be okay. If this is streaming live, if there's a link, can you put it in the chat maybe and I'll share it? But I'm ready to go. I'm always willing to talk about Indian Mounds and Casey or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. How did you become involved with the American Mounds?
Well, that's actually a long story. I think it's an interesting story too. It's because of dreams. In 1984, my first book came out. It was called The Archetype Experience. And I actually completed the book in 1982. And I was in the process of sending it to publishers, and back then you had to mail manuscripts to publishers. They looked at it for a while and then rejected it. That's the common thing over and over. And during that process in 1983, out of nowhere, I began having a series of recurring dreams. I can't really recall, nor can my wife recall exactly how many nights they occurred in a row, but it was at least five. And in those dreams, again, this came out of nowhere. I found myself standing on Indian mounds, which I didn't even know what Indian mounds were at the time. And I would take photos of these mounds. Then I would find myself on another mound and take a photo of it, and on another mound and take a photo of it. And this went on night after night after night, like I say, maybe 5 nights in a row. I really didn't have any idea what it meant. Then my wife and I had an experience together, and we saw a very, very large, colorful spider. It was about as big as a person's head, very, very large spider. And it was in our bedroom. And we live in Memphis. We lived in Memphis, Tennessee at the time. And we saw this spider in our bedroom. And it just shocked us. We started looking for it, couldn't find it, of course, because in the United States, there aren't any spiders that big. So anyway, I decided that we needed to go to an Indian mound. I'd never been to one. And Memphis had a site called Chucalissa. It means abandoned village. It's a Choctaw word for abandoned village. We went there, and when we walked to the front of the museum door, in the door, they had an illustration of a spider. And the spider was the exact same one with the same colors, same decorations that we had seen. And so I knew we were on the right track. And almost immediately, I came to the conclusion, again, this was out of nowhere, that I needed to write a book detailing every known mound left in the United States, which at the time, I didn't know how many there were. It was a huge task. And so we began visiting mounds, and we went to literally thousands upon thousands of mound sites in the United States, again, without knowing how many there were. I didn't know at the time, Smithsonian had found 100,000 sites, mound sites in the United States. I suppose we've probably been to, We
Oh
probably,
my God.
yeah, a lot of them, but that's just sites. Some of the sites had 120 mounds at a single site. So 100,000 sites translates into probably a million or more mounds. I suspect we've probably been to 10,000, 15,000 mounds. And so that's really how it started. I will add this about dreams. In 2008, I'd already written a number of books on mounds. But in 2008, I decided I need to, if I'm ever going to do this mound encyclopedia, I need to do it. So I started it and realized this is an overwhelming task. It is outside of my area. I'm actually a criminal psychologist. I was practicing pretty heavily at the time. I'm still involved in that work. But it was this Native American stuff was a task that was kind of thrust upon me from nowhere. So around sometime in late 2008, I decided this Mound Encyclopedia is too much work. And I convinced myself, okay, it's all this work for nothing because no one will ever buy it because nobody's interested in mounds. I'm not an archaeologist, so museums and libraries won't be buying it. And I told my wife, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to write. I'll write about mounds now and then in some of the popular books I was writing. And that night, that very night, I had another dream. And in that dream, I was surrounded by countless thousands upon thousands of Native Americans, dead spirits, all over 360 degrees. They were around me, screaming at me, telling me that I had promised that I would do this. And I do vaguely remember saying, yeah, I'm going to do this in the 1980s. It's something I was going to do. And they were calling me names. They were saying, this is just like a white man. You know, you go back in your word, and on it went. And so I got up the next morning and I told my wife, okay, I've decided I am going to do this. So I focused on it. I completed the first edition in 2009, redid it in 2016. I've never had another dream like that. People ask me all the time when you go to these sites, am I do I feel the presence? I do feel some presences now and then. People always go and they want to try and make peace with the entities or spirits, and they say if you don't do that, you'll have bad things happen. I've never had anything bad happen, and when I go to mound sites, I get the sense that what they kind of say to me is, "Glad to see you here, and it's about time." That's what I pick up from them. So that's how I got into it. I knew nothing about mounds when I had the dreams. I say all the time that everything I knew about Indian mounds in 1983 when I had the dream, you could have put it on a postage stamp. I did take anthropology in college. It never had a word about mounds in it. The American educational system doesn't really approach the topic at all, and I knew nothing. But I know quite a bit now. So that's how I got into it.
Where, what were the purpose of the mounds, and what are the different types then?
Okay, well, they're basically pyramids, but they're made out of earth, and they're not just pyramids. Some of them are burial mounds. So there are really three or four different types. The type that most people are aware of in the United States are what we call platform mounds or truncated pyramids. Most of them, not all, but most of the ones in the United States, which Mexico is part of North America, so I can't just say North America because Mexico has stone pyramids. But in the United States area and Canada of North America, there are some stone mounds and stone pyramids that are truncated. A truncated pyramid has a flat top on it, a platform. That's why they're also known as platform mounds. Those were used for various purposes, but mainly that is where they put the structures for the elite, the leaders, the chiefs, the shaman, and so on to live in. And in some of those, they were very big. The largest one that still exists in the United States is 100 feet tall. It is as tall as a 10-story building. It has a base covering somewhere, depending on who you read, 14 to 17 acres, which has a base larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Inside of that particular mound, which is in Cahokia,
Oh
Illinois,
God.
it's a multi-level truncated pyramid, 100 feet tall. And at the base, again, it's somewhere between 14 to 17 acres. In it, there's a stone structure that's never been dug into, a very, very large stone structure. It probably will never be dug into, at least not in any of our lifetimes. So that is one type of mound. There are also burial mounds that are conical in nature. And they use the term conical because on the ground, they look like a rounded heap or the top of an ice cream cone. So they're rounded. Some of those get very, very large. The largest one that I know of was 85 feet high. There are many in the United States that are 70 feet high, 65 feet high. Some of those actually contained literally thousands of burials in one mound, literally thousands of them. Some of them are put in very well made stone chambers that look identical to the stone chambers found in England. I've been to many of them all around England, went with Andrew Collins to probably about 30 sites over a couple weeks many years ago. But the ones in American mounds look pretty much identical. So those are burial mounds. There are probably 1 million of those, or were 1 million. There might be 300,000-400,000 of those still remaining. Some of
Millions.
them are millions. Some of them are very small. Some of them are very large. Then there are what we call geometric earthworks, which are elongated mounds that are formed by walls of earth, some of which in Ohio are 56 miles long. They connect Chillicothe, Ohio to Newark, Ohio. And it's like 100. So imagine this, imagine a straight
God.
highway that is 56 miles long. The highway is 175 feet wide. And on both sides of the highway, there are walls of earth enclosing it. These walls run 56 miles between Newark, Ohio and Chillicothe, Ohio. And what they connect are gigantic octagons, squares, circles with mounds inside of them. They're multifaceted geometric earthworks. So that is another type. There are hundreds upon hundreds to thousands of those. There are a couple hundred still remaining, but there once were many thousands of those. We also have stone mounds, which are often called cairns here in the United States. And there are linear mounds that are just straight mounds. Often those contain burials. And we have effigy mounds. Serpent Mound in Ohio is probably the most famous. It is like a quarter-mile long effigy mound of a serpent, and it's on the top of a precipice, a mountaintop precipice, which is elevated in the inside of a huge hole caused by a meteorite strike millions of years ago. So there are effigy mounds that look like animals or people. There are actually mounds that look like people. There were several thousand of those that are recorded. Loads of those are in the northern United States, in the states of Minnesota and Michigan, Iowa. There are also mounds in California and in Oregon. They're all over. Most people only know about the ones in the eastern part of the United States, but they're literally in every state in the country. There you go. Those are the types.
Are they still being built? Are they,
Well,
Gregory, are they still being built today?
okay, so that's actually an interesting question. So mound building in America by the ancient mound builders basically ceased around the year 1700 when the Americas were discovered in 1492. There were incursions by the Spanish and the French into the southeastern part of the United States, which they called La Florida, which means the flowers. Florida means flowers in Spanish. So when the Spanish first came in, they found thousands and thousands of what I'll call towns and villages, but some of them were cities. It's like the place Cahokia I mentioned. Cahokia is about 15 miles from St. Louis, Missouri. Cahokia had a population of at least 50,000 people in the year 1200. It was bigger than London was at the time. Cahokia had 120 mounds. Well, the Spanish went to a lot of these sites and they were looking for gold. And in the process of that, this was in the very early 1500s and late 1400s, they made many incursions and they brought in diseases. The diseases were smallpox. It was mainly smallpox and it wiped out 90% of the population. So by the time settlers started coming in, mainly from England and other areas of Europe, most of them came from England, Ireland, and so on, Scotland. Most of the mound building had ceased because all of the native populations had declined by over 90%. Now, the French found some in extreme southern Mississippi called the Natchez site, and they were still practicing mound building in the middle 1700s. And in modern times, Native Americans are repatriating skeletal remains and artifacts. So they are building some small mounds to put the artifacts and the skeletal remains back in mounds that were taken out mainly in the 1800s. So, yes, there are some, but they're not doing the same things there. And this repatriation is done secretly, so no one digs in and tries to loot these sites. So, that's the answer.
Yeah. Right. Um, when we talk about the Smiths and others finds, when they started digging, what did they find then?
Well, the Smithsonian really did not. This is interesting. The Smithsonian did not want to excavate mounds. That was not one of the things they wanted to do. And it was in the late 1800s that a member of Congress, the United States Congress, the Smithsonian is a quasi-governmental agency. It actually got its money by a guy by the name of John Smithson from England. And the United States government sent a guy over to England, and I think it was 48,000 gold coins he collected from this guy's estate, John Smithson, brought it to the United States, and that is the money that started the Smithsonian Institution. That was, I believe, it was 1848. And so in the 1870s, Congress gave the Smithsonian money to operate a national museum and to start a Bureau of Ethnology, which they were interested in Native American, South American, Central American beliefs and culture, but they didn't want to dig into mounds. Well, Congress required them to dig into the mounds starting around 1874, 75, and required them to do that to identify who built the mounds, because at the time there was a controversy about who built the mounds. Like I said, when the first Spanish and French went through in the early 1500s, almost all the native populations just died off. 90% to 97% of the population died off in one generation from disease. I mean, it was incredible, just incredible. So the natives that remained, the few natives that remained, started moving west as the settlers came in, and they didn't know who built the mounds. That's where the myth of the mound builder started. So Congress wanted to figure out who in the world built the mounds, and so the Smithsonian had to dig into mounds. So they did a 7-year project. They dug into roughly 3,000 mounds, excavated 3,000 burial mounds. They recovered millions of skeletal remains, millions, tens upon millions, probably over 100 million artifacts, many of which are just incredible. Copper artifacts, pottery, every kind of stone artifact you can think of. Just amazing what they recovered. But in the course of it, in several areas, they found what they referred to as giant skeletons. The Smithsonian reports from what was called the Bureau of Ethnology reported finding 17 skeletons in burial mounds, mainly in one area. More than half of them were found in this one area of West Virginia. And these 17 skeletons all measured roughly 7 feet to 7.5 feet tall. 7 feet to 7.5 feet. They were all buried in very elaborate tombs, like they were extremely
Right.
important people. And today, the Smithsonian will tell you we never found giants. The Smithsonian will tell you that, oh, we don't believe that they were 7 feet tall. No, we don't have any of the skeletal remains anymore. Nobody can test them. It's illegal to test them now anyway because of American laws. But they say they must have mismeasured. They didn't know what they were doing back then, and that's the current belief. But even after that, archaeologists from the University of Kentucky, the Carnegie Institute, and several other universities, up until the 1970s, they excavated more in that same area, and they found several more. There's probably another dozen skeletons that have been found that are 7 to roughly 8 feet in height out of mounds. And of course, there's thousands of newspaper articles in the United States saying that skeletons up to 20 feet in height were found. I've never been able to verify a
Did
single one more than 8 feet. Sorry.
very did a lot of them skeletons disappear then?
Well, okay,
What
so
would dug up?
in some ways they did, yes. The Smithsonian was interested. I mean, I have copies of what they instructed their field agents who did the actual excavations. And what they were told to do was to collect artifacts for display in the National Museum. And they wanted skulls for display, skulls and artifacts, not skeletal remains. So when the Smithsonian got full skeletons, their rules and instructions to their field agents were to box up everything and ship it to them. So they pulled out whatever looked good for display, and everything else they simply sealed the boxes and put them into storage. And so they stored, the last count that I ever read, they had 1.5 to 2 million skeletal remains in storage. But as of today, most of those have been returned to Native Americans for repatriation or reburial. But they were never able to find any that they had in storage that were more than that were 7 feet and taller. They were requested many times to pull them out so researchers could look at them, but they could never find them. And again, it's kind of like that movie Raiders from the Lost Ark, where at the ending they took the artifacts and they put them in this giant warehouse that had sealed boxes everywhere. That literally is kind of what's in the Smithsonian storage warehouses. So they weren't even able to find them. And
Yeah.
even today, they don't know where everything is. And actually, the Tennessee Valley Authority, who built dams along the Tennessee River and areas in the Mississippi and Ohio River, and even went out to the Dakotas and got in the Missouri River. The Tennessee Valley Authority has even more artifacts and more skeletal remains than the Smithsonian in storage that they've never looked at. They can't find what's what. It's just giant warehouses packed with boxes that have never been opened. That's the story. I mean, it's a strange story, but all that's the truth.
When we talk about them skeletons, I wonder if any one of those would have been a Bigfoot.
Um, I will tell you that in California, back trying to remember the year, it was a book Andrew Collins and I put out in 2014. I would say it was 2011 where they analyzed some skeletal remains that were highly unusual, that were, they called it extremely robust, like huge. Not necessarily tall. It was like 6 feet, 6 feet two, but it was like a
Hmm.
massive structure. Now, Andrew Collins and I believe that some of these were of Denisovan origins. Denisovan is an extinct branch of humanity that goes back 400, 500,000 years ago. But most of us carry some Denisovan DNA, and Native Americans carry that. And the belief that I have about Bigfoot is that Bigfoot is, if it exists, is a member of an extinct branch of humanity, possibly Denisovan, Homo habilis, Gigantropithecus. I don't know. But it's possible. That's possible. I know Native Americans, particularly in the West, the western half of the United States, had lots and lots of legends about meeting what can be called Bigfoot. Absolutely. But to my knowledge, a skeleton has never been, shown that said this is Bigfoot and been verified. But I know enough about the reports and have visited enough reservations and the museums associated with them and information areas that they do have the legends, and it's something they believe is real. I'm hoping the delay here
Well,
doesn't kind of freak people. We
yeah.
got like a 3-second
What
delay.
astronomical alignments have been found
Oh yeah.
at
Okay.
some sites, at Mound
Absolutely.
sites?
Uh, me-
Astronomical alignments have been found at some sites.
yes. So astronomical alignments, what are they to and what are they used for? They are similar to those in Egypt. In fact, Graham Hancock, in his book America Before, and in his Netflix series, he mentions both of my books on this and Andrew's, because what we have found is that many American sites were conducting a ritual similar to the Egyptian death rituals, where the pharaoh was supposedly sent to the sky. And most people know that Orion and Orion's
Yeah,
belt is somehow incorporated into the three pyramids at Giza. In North America, the North American natives, the Native Americans here, and well as Central America, um, they also believed that the soul made a journey to the sky world. And the first stop in the sky world was to Orion, but it was Orion's Nebula. The Maya, the Maya in Central America, in Yucatan, called it Shilbaba. And it's where the soul went after death. But that was only the start of the journey. So a lot of Native American mound sites have more than one mound. Like I said before, some of them have up to 120 mounds. That's the largest site that we know of. But there are many of them that have 10, 12 mounds, several of them that have these geometric earthworks like the squares and circles and octagons. The octagons generally are used to chart the movements of the moon over 18.61 years. That's the lunar cycle. The moon only does its standstills in the north, south, and so on at the same spot every 18.61 years. So these were permanent sites used to chart the movements of the moon, and they were eclipse predictors. They could tell the shaman there exactly when and where an eclipse would occur. But these same sites also were used for the death ritual. The death ritual started with the journey of the soul to Orion's Nebula, which is also called Messier 42. In Native American belief, it was the Orion constellation was a hand. It was the hand constellation. The three belt stars of Orion formed a severed wrist. And then in the center of the hand was an ogi, which looks like an eye. And a lot of people say that's the eye and hand symbol, and a hamsa, which is used in India and so on. In North America, it's not. It is the hand constellation. So that
yeah,
was the start of the death journey. So there are mounds that we know, like a shaman would stand on at a certain time of the year. We know the dates. It's right around the winter solstice is when they did this. So the shaman would stand on the mound. The shaman would look in a certain direction toward the west, there would be another mound at a prominent spot. There was a pull on top of the mound. The top of the pull, from the shaman's perspective, would look right at the horizon. And in that horizon, on December 21st or so of every year, Orion's nebula would sink into the horizon exactly above that pull. And that was the exact moment they held a ritual, and it was a cremation ritual, a giant bonfire, usually in an enclosed earthwork. And that ritual was designed to shoot the soul into Orion's nebula. And it was right before dawn. And then the sun came up, and the Hand constellation, or Orion, they knew it then went down under the earth, and it came up on the other side on the eastern horizon the next evening. And at that point, the soul would hop out of this enclosure it was in. They had shells, like a shell is what this ogie was, and the soul would tuck itself in it, make a safe journey through the underworld, come up the next night, hop out onto the Milky Way, and then it would begin the journey toward the north. And the Milky Way was called the Path of Souls, sometimes called the Wolf Trail. They had other words for it. And as it made the journey to the north, it came to another spot, the fork of the Milky Way. And the constellation of Cygnus is located there with the star Deneb. They saw the constellation of Cygnus as a giant raptor bird. And at that point, the soul would go through a test. And if the soul had any regrets, if the soul was not worthy, the soul could be cast to the underworld, or the soul could be sent back to earth for reincarnation. They had a real big belief in reincarnation. And if it did pass the test, the soul would then hop to another ogie, which was another star, which was the way or the portal out of the sky world to what they called the other world. The other world was often described to early ethnographers in a way that would conceal what their true meaning was. We might call it heaven, but they called it the happy hunting ground. And they told the ethnographers that in a way to just shut them up. They didn't want them to ask more questions about it. So there are mounds that at these sites, they don't just align to Orion. They align to the winter, the solstices, both the summer and winter solstice, to the equinox, which we just had an equinox yesterday, the spring equinox. There's also the fall equinox. They always align to those, and they would align to the setting of Cygnus, or the star Deneb, which was in the northwest. We believe this belief system actually developed around 17 to 18,000 years ago. And it was probably seen all over the world, at least the northern half of Earth, all those civilizations. And the same belief system was probably in Egypt. Even Graham Hancock says that today in his presentations, that they appear to have shared the exact same belief system. So yes, there's a lot of archaeoastronomical alignments at hundreds of American mound sites. I've done calculations at about 30 of them, and regular archaeologists have done calculations at dozens and dozens and dozens, and the same things come up again and again. But none of these alignments, other than the solstice and the equinox, started until roughly the year 2004, because nobody knew until 2004 about this Path of Souls belief and the importance of Orion and Cygnus in it.
And you found some in the UK?
Yes, there are several in the UK. Andrew Collins is the expert in that. I've been there many times with him. All over. Cygnus and Orion appear to pop up virtually everywhere. And there, as opposed to here, I don't know any, well, I have to take that back now. I don't know any mound sites, I'll put it that way. I don't know any American mound sites that have what you'd call a porthole. Like you have a big stone, you have a giant standing stone that has a hole in it, a porthole. And those
Yeah.
portholes were used to make sight lines so you could be at another mound or another stone and you could look directly through that hole and see a very specific star, usually
Right.
setting at a specific time of the year. And Andrews found those at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and now there's another site in Turkey. I can't pronounce it, but there's another even older site in Turkey. There are some of these in South and Central America, and there are a couple of places in the United States, particularly in Florida, where you do find these holes in stones. I cannot explain them. A lot of them are around Tampa Bay and Tampa, Florida. In fact, you can take a tour and go to them. They're completely enigmatic. Nobody knows exactly what they are. Some people say they were mooring stones for giant ships. Others say they were um, holes used for astronomical alignments, but and associated with Atlantis. I don't really know what those are used for. That remains to be an enigma. There are a few associated with the stone chambers found in the eastern United States, like in Vermont, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania has quite a few of those. And those look like the ones in England also, the giant stone chambers there. So, yeah, there's a lot that we don't know. Mainstream archaeology tends to not like any of this in America. Mainstream archaeology doesn't like the new timelines. I mean, one thing we haven't discussed is when mounds were built. I mainly picked up when Columbus discovered America and when the Spanish came in, roughly in the early 1500s. Mound building in South America began, we know, as early as the year 8,400 BC, 10,400 years ago. That's incredible. In North America,
Oh,
the up until 2022, in North America, the oldest mounds were in Louisiana, and they dated to 4,700 BC. 4,700 BC, or 6,700 years ago. Well, in 2022, one of the mounds in
oh
Louisiana,
my
it's on the
God.
camp. It's one of the mounds on the campus of Louisiana State University, and I taught there for about 5 years at LSU. One of the mounds there was redated. They did numerous corings into it, and it's dated to 9,000 BC. So it's 11,000 years old. Now, most archaeologists don't like that because it makes no sense. It doesn't fit
Thousand.
their, yeah, it doesn't fit the chronologies. We know that the so-called Clovis people now were here around 14,000 years ago, but there were clearly already people here when the Clovis people entered the Americas. And so now in South America, the dates of human habitation, it's very clear there were people here 50,000 years ago in South America, 50,000 years ago. And there are sites in Mexico. Hueyatlaco is one. Hueyatlaco is very close to Mexico City. I think it's 14 miles from Mexico City. And Hueyatlaco has been dated by Mexican archaeologists, by the United States Geological Survey, by physicists and geologists and archaeologists in France and Germany, the Max Planck Institute. I can't remember the name of the one in France, but it's the most prestigious one. It'll come to mind in a minute. But Hueyatlaco has been dated to 400,000 BC. And again, it makes no sense. Now, clearly, whoever was there were
That's
not
incredible.
modern. Yeah, I know but they weren't. They couldn't have been modern humans like us. There are lots of extinct versions of humans. One of the things Andrew
Who do you
Collins,
think they are then?
well, Denisovans. The Denisovans go back at least that far. One of the extinct branches of humanity, perhaps Neanderthals, although no Neanderthal bones have been verified in the Americas, they have found numerous skeletal remains called in the archaeological literature Neanderthaloid, because they look Neanderthal, but they never did any genetic tests on them. So they call them Neanderthaloid. It's a very strange term, but there's 4 or 5 of those Neanderthaloid ones found in the Americas, mainly in North America, as far north as um, Iowa, which is up there in the United States. So that's where one was found. They found some in California, and I don't remember the other
Yeah.
spots. But it could be any of them. Uh, we know from genetics that Native Americans in the United States. When I say Native Americans, I'm talking about those in the United States. If they're from Canada, you call them First Nations people. In Central and South America, there's different terms for them. Everybody wants to say they were first. But in the United States, we have roughly 700 tribes. So you can't say First Nations because they all claim to have been here a very long time. And they were, their ancestors were here. But we know that there were lots of
Exactly.
genetic strains that were killed off. And we know that through mitochondrial DNA studies, because there are dozens of mitochondrial DNA strains that geneticists say they are extinct strains. So it was a version of people, humanoid, uh, extinct humanoids that were here that were killed off, and their mitochondrial DNA no longer exists. So it's a great mystery. We don't really know, and this is the stuff that drives archaeologists crazy. They don't like to talk about it. They'll tell you, "Oh, all this is crazy," but it's not. It's, to me, it's some of the most interesting stuff around. It's a great unknown, and
Because they're
some
still,
people, yeah, some people say
I was going to
America was
say,
first. Yeah,
because
I don't really know. Go ahead. Sorry,
they're still,
I, I can't.
and they're still looking for giants now.
Yes, there are people. The problem in the United States is it is illegal to do genetic testing on any skeletal remains that are found that are prehistoric. Anything I mean, if you had, if law enforcement wanted to dig up somebody and test their DNA out of or a historic cemetery, which means that it's modern times, that can be done with a court order. But you can't do that with prehistoric
Oh
remains. It's
yeah,
illegal. You have to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they've only allowed it one time, one case
Supreme
since
Court.
not, yeah, since 1990, only one time. There were genetic tests done on skeletal remains before the law was passed, and they got samples from skeletons, and they were allowed to do testing on them. I don't know of any testing going on now of skeletal remains because it's illegal. Even in people's dissertations for like PhDs in genetics or anthropology, they can't do it. You can't test it anymore genetically. It's just the way it is.
Times have changed a bit, and I think
Well,
we DNA now, where you can find out who people are and where they're from.
absolutely.
If that had been done hundreds of years ago, we'd probably found more out.
Well, we would have. We if one of the things I've offered to do this, I've offered to pay for the genetic testing of the some of the large skeletal remains that have been found in various places to see if they're Denisovan or whatever. I actually had a mainstream archaeologist that I was working with, but we could not get any from the United States. We couldn't find anyone any of the museums holding them to allow any testing because you'd have to go to the tribe, whatever tribe claims an affinity or a relationship to that. It would be up to the archaeologist, and the archaeologist told me there's just no way we can do it. they're not going to allow it. Myself, my DNA was tested, and I have more Neanderthal DNA in me than 80% of the population. My wife says that explains a great deal. Uh, so you can have your Neanderthal DNA tested today to see what you have. When I had mine done, they weren't testing for Denisovan DNA, but that is something that I intend to have done as soon as I get around to it, just to see. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, it just makes you wonder where you're from
And what we are, yeah,
or
absolutely.
what part
Uh,
of the world you're from.
well, the genetics testing, they are doing it in South
Who are
America.
we?
Yeah. In South America, they've taken some of these Moche pyramids, which are gigantic. When these pyramids were found in Peru, they thought they were mountains because they were made out of mud bricks. They are hundreds of feet tall. They look like mountains. And so, as mud bricks over thousands of years, they have eroded. The outer mud bricks eroded. And when they discovered they were pyramids, they started digging into them. And out of the chambers in them, they found loads of gold artifacts, which are in now the museums in Central and South America. They're incredible. Lots of gold, but they found some burials that had like 50 in one burial tomb, 60 in another. And then they found one where they had like the king of Saipan and the queen of Saipan. And they found the shaman of Saipan surrounded by his female helpers. They found these and they tested them all for DNA. What they found is that some of their DNA, some of them came from the Middle East. The Middle East. Don't ask me to explain that. I cannot. But some came from the Middle East. They found that like 47 who were sacrificed. There were 47 of them in a tomb. They were all sacrificed. They all had the exact same mitochondrial DNA, which is maternal DNA. They all had the same type, and it was different from the maternal DNA found by the chief and the chief's wife and their helpers. And what they believe is at this site at one time there was some sort of an uprising. And so what the chief did, this is what DNA can tell you. What the chief and his people did was to kill off that entire lineage that was trying to take over and trying to become the leadership of it. So they just massacred all of them and buried them all together. So they killed off all of the males and females that were in that other lineage. And that's the same thing that they know has also gone on at several mound sites in North America. So that's one of the more interesting things that DNA research has done. It's allowed us to really look into what was going on at these sites and what a lot of their belief systems were. A lot of areas there, a lot of things to that we could talk about. But wherever you want to go, I know you've got we got 10 minutes left or so, or 15, whatever. Let's take it where you want to go.
What? Yeah. What are you looking into now then, Gregory? What you're
Well,
looking
okay.
into the future? What your main priorities are for another book?
Well, okay. So I'm doing several things. One of the things that we are going to do in just a week, I have I'm on Twitter. I have a fairly large following about mounds on Twitter. Out of the 35,000 Twitter followers, I'd say half of them are really into the Native American mounds. So we're setting up a series of experiments for April the 6th when we have a full eclipse going over the central part of the United States. We are going to go to numerous mound sites where this full eclipse is going over. and we're going to measure the magnetic influence of the eclipse at these various sites, because there is research showing that there are magnetic fluctuations that occur. And we know that Native American, this is a book I published in 1994. We know that there were rituals that the Native Americans did during eclipses. And they just during that 8-minute window when there was a full eclipse. And in these eclipses, they reported some of the most profound experiences that they would have. And that is the manifestation of spirits and so on with their rituals. So we're going to do this experiment at a whole bunch of sites. We've set up, right now, there's like 7 or 8 sites that people are going to go to. I'm sure by the time this takes place, we'll have a couple dozen sites. So that's one thing that we're working on. I am in the process of redoing the Mound Encyclopedia to the 3rd edition. This is the 2nd edition of it. It's a very large, oversized hardback. In fact, I just turned to the site that I'm going to, by accident, to the site I plan on going to. These are some of these. An illustrated encyclopedia. This is a site in Missouri, and
Oh
it
yeah,
shows,
yeah, I can see that.
yeah, you've got, these are the truncated mounds at the site. They're very large. They had walls around them, earthen walls that had palisades stuck in. Palisades are wooden walls. And those wooden walls at some sites were up to 25 feet high. So they were fortresses. There were thousands of those around in North America, in the United States, thousands of these cities that were walled fortresses. At a lot of the sites, they found along where the palisade walls are, they found arrowheads. Thousands and thousands of arrowheads around the outside of the walls, which indicated they were attacked, and the attackers shot arrows with fire on the ends to stick in the walls to burn them to the ground. That's how they figured it out. And then they would dig down and they'd find the remains of the burnt posts in them. So I'm rewriting that encyclopedia. I'm working on a book that is very specific and very focused on the exact rituals that the Native Americans performed. A lot of the rituals at different times, like the death ritual. A lot of people are aware, mainly from Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan here in the United States, his show. But Graham has talked a lot about DMT and ayahuasca, the substance ayahuasca and DMT. Well,
Yeah.
DMT is dimethyltryptamine. It is in, if you take ayahuasca, is a combination of a couple plants. Everybody thinks it's only in South America. It's not. It was used all over in North America too. Native Americans used it with a concoction. They made pottery, very specific looking, and on the outside of they formed the pottery in the shape of the plant that they put into the pot, into that vessel. And that hasn't been known that many years. And then there's been tests looking at the residue inside of the pottery and the pipes that they used. So we know that they did rituals using DMT, just like it was done in South America. And now the same thing has been found in Egypt. And I got that notice today from the expert in this field. They have done residue studies from Egypt, which were only fairly recently released. And the Egyptians, during their rituals, used a DMT substance also, which in the United States, there are probably 10 plants and roots that you can collect. And then you have to mix some really dangerous substances that you grind it down. And that's what these pottery vessels were used for. You mix them together in the right amount. And then you would have these DMT experiences. I'll call them hallucinogenic, although not everybody agrees. that you're truly hallucinating. Some people think you were interacting with a spirit world that really exists. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. We are about to go to a series of caves with imagery in them. They're very remote, close to the public. I've been invited to go to those to analyze some of the plants around these cave sites and to look at some of the iconography in them. So I'm doing a book on that, and of course I'm busy in my profession too. So that's what I'm working on presently, and that's where it's going. And I'm not going to
Oh,
figure
I can
any of it
imagine.
out. Yeah, it's a journey. It's just a journey. There's never a destination. I finish a book, and as soon as I finish, I move on to the next project, and that's what I've done since the 1970s, actually. So here I am.
Are you doing any more work with Andrew Collins?
Andrew and I stay in touch. We are appearing together at a conference in Miami later this year. We will go to the Miami Circle and probably go to some of these other sites in Florida. So, yeah, I saw Andrew a few months ago. We appeared together in a conference just a few months ago in Tennessee near Nashville. He stays at my house when he comes here, and then we drove up to Nashville and stayed several days, went to a number of sites. Andrew and I did a book that came out in 2022 called Origins of the Gods. In 2019, Andrew and I did a book called Denisovan Origins. And we're going to continue with this. I'm not sure what we'll work on next. Andrew
Mm.
just had his book on Karahan Tepe. It's about to be released, and he's working on another one on this additional site in Turkey, which was just found. And I believe I think he was over there just till a couple days ago. I believe I can't pronounce the site; it's very strange wording. But we'll do some more in later this year at this conference in
Yeah.
Miami. I say it's Miami, but it's on the beach, so close enough. So that's kind of what I'm always busy. Um, and it's a journey. I tell
Right.
that to people. Take a journey. It's all a journey. There is no destination. You get places, enjoy the journey, enjoy where you are, but there's always more until there isn't, and then there isn't, and you'll journey to whatever's afterward. Maybe it's that you'll go to the sky world and go to that other world, which is seldom discussed. What they believed is in the other world. And it's not just this. They saw it very much as the ancient Hebrew
Ex-
belief in the guff, the container of souls. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
very interesting. Where can people find your book, Ethereum?
The best thing to do, the best way to find me is to Google my name, and it's Gregory. Put my middle initial in there, L, and last name is Little, like small, Gregory L. Little. If you just put Greg Little in, you can find me. But America has a couple of football players named Greg Little, and they will pop up. You'll see football players, all named Greg Little first. So put in Gregory L. Twitter is an easy place to talk to me and interact with me, but you can find all my books there, lots of links right on that first page. I'll pop up. So that's the place to find me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Very
Thank
interesting subject. People in the chat room saying, Agree Star, very interesting. Um, really interesting topic tonight, Stargazer said. So they're all enjoyed your talk today.
Well, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Greg. Really interesting.
I thank you. If you come
She
up with
said,
a link, let
Stargazer
me know.
said, more books to look out for.
Thank you. I appreciate it very
I
much.
will
If
do. I'll send it
okay,
you.
excellent. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody, and goodbye. Have a good night or a
I
good
will
day
do.
or whatever it may be. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. Bye bye.
Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Right. My guest on Friday is Shirley Margaret Wilkes. She's from Leeds in the UK and she's a psychic medium. So that's this Friday coming, the 22nd at 7 p.m. this Friday. It's only for another couple of weeks and then we'll be back to normal. And then I'll sort something out when we put the clocks back. We'll have a regular time slot for the whole year then. No change in times. Nine's just great. Thank you, Bob and Greg. Good night. Yes, so this Friday, Shirley Margaret Wilkes, she's a psychic medium from Leeds in the UK. She'll be doing card readings. So hopefully everybody will be there on Friday at 7 p.m. Thank you again to everyone. I like it when to Joanne, Stargazer, Diane, Alison, Janet, James. There's loads. I just sometimes I forget the names, and sometimes you can't go. Oh, you can sometimes go back. And Diane and there's everybody, and it's so nice when everybody goes to the chat room. So don't forget Friday night, 7 p.m. And everybody will get a reading on Friday. I would say good night and God bless. Thank you again. Take care. Lots of love from Bob. Bye for now.